Good morning, Titans of Planning. We're going to go in about 30 seconds. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Housing Committee meeting. I believe this is number 9. Is this number 9? This is number 9. It's good to be here. First, I'd like to just acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, dont la culture et la présence sont enrichies et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. I don't believe I've received any regrets this morning, so could I ask the clerk to please do the roll call?
Councillor Brockington. Councillor Curry. Here. Councillor Dudas.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Here.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
And Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. First order of business, this is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as 5.1 to 5.4 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on May 24th, 23, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? See none. Confirmation of the minutes. Are the minutes of the PHC meeting 8 Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 confirmed? Thank you. We'll run through the agenda to see what needs to be held. The item on Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative. Is that item carried? The zoning bylaw amendment for 180 Main Street. I know we have a delegation this morning. I'm going to ask for the staff presentation, so we'll hold that item. The zoning bylaw amendment for 2504 White Street. We have a delegation this morning. I'm going to ask staff to give us the presentation, so that item will be held. The item at 1568 Meadowbrook Road in Beacon Hill, we do have a delegation, and I'll be asking for the staff to give us their presentation. That item will be held. The item at 5618 Hazeldean Road, I know Vice Chair Gower has a referral motion that I think we can deal with fairly quickly. Vice Chair Gower, do you want to make that motion?
Thank you. Whereas the City of Ottawa's new official plan promotes healthy, vibrant, and walkable 50-minute neighborhoods with improved local amenities and services, and whereas locating smaller scale commercial uses such as limited retail, restaurants, and personal service businesses closer to where people live forms an integral part of achieving 50-minute neighborhoods, and whereas Section 6.2.2 of the official plan states in the minor corridor designation, this plan shall permit a mix of uses which support residential uses and the evolution of a neighborhood towards 15-minute neighborhoods. Development may be required where contextually appropriate to provide commercial or surface uses on the ground floor. Whereas the Fernbank Community Design Plan calls for mixed-use development in this location, and whereas the built form of only live-work units proposed by Minto will not ensure the delivery of much-needed local commercial uses for the Fernbank area, and whereas the land fragmentation that would occur if the live-work units were subdivided and conveyed would curtail the delivery of local commercial for the future, Therefore, be it resolved that zoning bylaw application for 5618 Hazeldean Road be referred back to staff and that staff be directed to work with the applicant to identify approximately 0.5 hectares of land at the corner of Robert Grant Avenue and Abbott Street to accommodate local commercial uses such as retail store, personal service use, restaurant and daycare, and ensure that the urban design guidelines for non-residential building and site design within the urban design guidelines for greenfield neighborhoods are followed. And be it further resolved that staff be directed to prepare a new report with respect to the zoning bylaw application 5618 Hazeldean Road and provide recommendations to the Planning and Housing Committee by June 7th, ensuring that appropriate notice is provided as required and that the amendments are consistent with the objectives and intent of the Fernbank CDP, the city's official plan, and the provincial policy statement.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I know Lisa De La Rosa and Carl Fernie are here for the applicant. Can I ask the applicant's representatives if the committee is prepared to carry this referral motion? Did you want to speak to the item?
No, Mr. Chair, we don't need to speak to the item. We're going to be working with staff here in the next 2 weeks or next week to get this done.
Thank you. Members of the committee, did you have any questions with respect to the motion or the item itself?
I don't have a question. I just want to say that it's great to see so many residents advocating who wrote in to say that they want to see this kind of development in their ward. They want walkable streets. And so I think this referral motion is excellent and we need this everywhere, not just downtown.
Thank you very much, Councillor Choster. Anyone else? Seeing no further questions, is the referral motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. So with that, we will move back to the top of the agenda. And the first item held is with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment for 180 Main Street. And I'll ask the staff to please give us their presentation.
Chair, staff are available online and prepared to give the presentation virtually.
Good morning, Masha. We're in your hands.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Masha Vakula, planner and file lead on the zoning bylaw amendment for 180 Main Street property to permit a 3-story mixed-use building with 5 residential units above a ground floor restaurant. Next slide, please. So the subject site is a regular interior lot fronting on Main Street, located in the Old Ottawa East, across from St. Paul University. The subject site is currently occupied by a 2-story single detached dwelling that will be demolished. The property is subject to Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan and Community Design Plan with the same title. Next slide, please. Thank you. The area surrounding the site and Main Street is characterized by a broad mix of uses and building typologies typical to traditional Main Street. It's planning staff opinion that the proposal of a 3-story mixed-use building with 5 residential and 1 2-bedroom units, is consistent with the established low-rise character along the western side of Main Street and complements the existing broad mix of uses along traditional Main Street. The development will include separate dedicated garbage rooms in the basement for both residential and commercial uses. A total of 8 bicycle parking spaces are proposed in the basement storage unit as well. The basement will be accessible both by elevator and stairs. A rear yard is divided between residential and commercial uses. Half of it is accessible by tenants and can be used as amenity area. The remaining area of the rear yard is dedicated to the restaurant as a decorative feature with no access to customers. No vehicle parking is proposed. Next slide, please. Thank you. The subject site is currently zoned traditional Main Street zone, subzone 7, with urban exception 2182. It permits a broad range of residential and non-residential uses in a compact and pedestrian-oriented built form, including restaurants and dwelling units. It sets up a number of performance standards as well, such as minimum required rear yard setback, 50% of transparent glazing of the front facade, and that the facade facing the main street must include at least one active entrance, serving each residential or non-residential use occupying any part of the ground floor. And the image also represents the pattern of reduced rear yard setbacks along the block. Next slide, please. The applicant seeks relief from existing performance standards associated with the traditional Main Street zone that will facilitate the proposed development. It is the reduced minimum transparent glazing requirement of 22%, the reduced rear yard setback of 4 meters, and a relief for active entrance for non-residential use to permit to be set back 9.1 meters from the front wall, and that no active entrance for residential use is required to face the main street. Next slide, please. Although the applicant is seeking relief from these performance standards, the rear yard setback provision, it's staff opinion that the proposed development is consistent with the immediate context of reduced rear yards in the block and upholds the intent of the TM zone. It's also, apologies, and the glazing on the ground floor and the facade facing the main street provide the sufficient glazing and animate the street, despite the portion of the front facade being set back 9.1 meters. That includes the entrance as well, and which is the subject of the relief. It contributes to inviting safe, active, and pedestrian-friendly environment with emphasis on the ground floor, street facade, and key internal uses at street level. Next slide, please. It's staff opinion that the proposal is consistent with the intent and policies of provincial policy statement, official plan, Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan, and Old Ottawa East Community Design Plan, urban design guidelines for development along traditional main streets, and zoning bylaw. Accordingly, staff recommends the zoning bylaw amendment to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masha. We'll come back to staff for any questions that committee members may have after we've heard from the delegations. And first of which is Rosalind Hill is here for the applicant. Rosalind, I'm in your hands.
Hi, thank you. I've sent in a slide deck, which would be helpful. Okay, so Masha, thanks for a great presentation, and I won't repeat what Masha has said. So I want to speak to the requested changes to the performance standards in the zone, the location of doors, the percentage of windows on the front facade, and the rear setback. So first of all, just to orient you, if we go forward one slide, on the left, you see the existing Sula Walk building. So, and the subject site marked with the star. On the right, you see the proposed new build out, the proposed new development. So the right-hand image, the left-hand half of it is the existing Sula Walk building. And we intend to expand the building to the right so it will end up looking like one larger building, but it's really sort of two buildings touching each other. They're of complementary architectural style and material so that it looks unified. The owner of Sula Walk now lives in the existing building with his family. He and his wife run the Sula Walk restaurant, which is in the ground floor of the existing building. And they'd like to expand and build this additional building beside and joined so that they can move their restaurant to the new ground floor. They're changing their business model so that it's not just a sort of pick up and take away, but they'd like to have eat in. They'd also like to welcome cultural activities into their space. And they're really embedded and active in their community. So it will allow them a lot more opportunities. This new business model does require more space, and there's a limit to the width of the site. And so in order to meet the needs of their restaurant function, they need a bit more ground floor space, and that produces that rear yard setback reduction request. But looking at the front facade first here, you'll see that there are 2 proposed large service windows in the front, lots of glazing. In that front space is the kitchen area where they'll be making their dumplings. And so the intent is for it to be a very interesting place to walk past, to be eye-catching and to draw people in. The floor to ceiling height is quite high. And so when you calculate the percentage glazing on the front facade, it came to only 20% or 21%, whereas 50% is required. But I think you can see from looking at it, it is quite glassy, and it does meet that intent of having interesting windows to look into. So the point of the bylaw requirement is to have a really great facade that people want to look in, they want to be engaged. The sill level of those windows allows them to be service windows, which is just a really great function. So they will still be serving people who are just coming to pick up their food, and they have a thriving delivery business as well. So there could be more glazing if those sills were lower, but it's actually quite functional at the height that they're at. If we go to the next slide, please. Next slide again. These are context images. I'll come back to them maybe if there are questions. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so on the site plan, you'll see that the front facade is on the right hand of the slide. You'll see that the facade has a flat piece, a bevel or an angled piece with the takeout window in it. It's angled so that it is it's welcoming to people who are walking north or on Main Street. It's very visually eye-catching from the sidewalk at that angle, and it's angled in such a way that it allows lots of space for people to stand there without impeding the flow of pedestrian traffic. Then you also see there's a little alleyway. And this alleyway, I'll show you the 3D images next. It's intended to mimic an Asian alleyway. It'll be very decorated and welcoming and interesting. The intent is for it to be a destination on this street and to animate the street. So next image, please. Next slide. There you see closer up that alleyway and the kitchen and prep area in that dominant space at the front of the plan. Next slide, please. In front elevation, you can see the service windows and then the door on the left of the ground floor. But that's actually recessed back. Next image. This is a section, and in the bottom right of the section, you see that alleyway again. Next image.
Could you wrap up?
Yep. Next image. Next. Okay, so here you can see a view into the alleyway with the Asian umbrellas hanging in the from the ceiling, kind of a steampunk aesthetic on the side wall with the same rusty metal cladding that you have above. We are excited that this is going to be a great contribution to the street. Next slide. I'm just looking for the slide about the rear yard setback.
Sorry, Rosalind, if members have questions, you'll be able to get to that, but we are
okay
for the presentation.
Sure.
I do appreciate, thank you very much, Rosalind, the focus on why this isn't just as of right and the changes that you are looking for and the justification. That's greatly appreciated in the presentation. Thank you. Councillor Menard.
Thanks so much, Chair. Thank you, Rosalind, for the presentation. And I know you've worked heavily with our office on this application. I'm supportive of it. On the rear yard setback, I know you wanted to get to that. I do want to hear from you on that piece. I think that's the piece that the community is most concerned about, is just the trees in the back. And the Main Street, the rear yards there on Main Street and maintaining that tree canopy. So if I can just hear from you on that one piece, that'd be great. And you're on mute right now.
Could I get my slide deck back then, and we'll just flip forward until we see the the section showing the rear yards. Forward. There we go. Okay, so on the right, you see the proposed building with its setback to the rear yard, and then all the other kinds of setbacks that are occurring for other addresses along the street. And you'll see it's a whole mixed bag. Also, I direct you to the green line, which is 1/3 of our building at the back is set back to the green line. So not all of our building is built out to the proposed 4-meter setback. Even our building is a mix of setbacks. And next slide. Here you see it in 3D model so that you can get a sense of the variety of what's happening back there. And I think visually, this image is most helpful in seeing the way that it fits in with the rest. So the idea is to have something that's compatible and understanding the context and to get enough space in the length of the building for the restaurant to function. As far as trees go, there are a lot of weed trees along that back property line, and we'll continue to work with our neighbors to manage the trees that exist along the back there. There may be some constraints to do with soils and the proximity of roots to buildings because of the potential for marine soil. That doesn't mean that we can't have trees and continue to steward trees along the rear lot line.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much both. Are there any further questions for Rosalind? Seeing none, we do have a public delegation. Diane Kalbick is with the Old Ottawa East Community Association and is online. Ms. Kalbick, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. And welcome.
Thank you. Can you see me? I think you can hear me now, but can you see
We
me?
can hear you. We can't see you, and it's up to you how you want to proceed.
I'd like to turn on there.
We can see
I think you can see me now. Thank you. As you mentioned, I'm with the Old Ottawa East Community Association, specifically with the planning committee of the association. I'm here today on behalf of our chair of our committee, John Dance, who couldn't make it today, but I will speak to the points he made and refer you to the letter he sent yesterday to you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to basically cover that. I'm not going to use any slides. I will, like I said, refer you to the letter. I'd like to start by saying that we have really welcomed Sula Walk to the community. We think they've made a great addition to Main Street, to the vitality of Main Street, to the interesting food options on Main Street. And we're excited, like Rosalind, about what they're proposing to do in expanding, and we welcome their expansion. So we support the application with the notable exception of the request for the reduced rear yard setback. We have strong objections to the reduced rear yard setback. As I think you all know, we have an Old Ottawa East secondary plan that was developed over a few years through considerable work between the community and the city. And that secondary plan calls for rear yard setbacks to be implemented through the zoning bylaws. So that's basically official policy now, and we're asking that that be respected and that you ensure it has teeth. The rear yard setbacks are really important in our community for a few reasons. The applicant has argued that in this case, the reduced rear yard setback is going to be consistent with what's going on along Main Street because there are other reduced rear yard setbacks along Main Street. Well, by our calculation, in fact, of the 10 buildings along that strip, only 3 have reduced rear yard setbacks. So it's certainly not a majority by any means. 2 of those were built prior to the implementation of the secondary plan. So they weren't subject, obviously, to the secondary plan rules. One of them was the reduction of the reduced rear yard is compensated for to a certain degree by the fact that the second story and third story are the 45-degree angular plane setback. So in terms of massing and in terms of overlook and privacy with neighbors, there's not the issue there, despite the reduced rear yard setback. Also, and I will point out that for one of those three locations, 186 Main, it was the Committee of Adjustment that permitted a reduced rear yard setback. And in their conclusion, they specifically noted that it was not to set a precedent for future development along Main Street. So basically, we would take issue with what the applicant and what Fred have said about the reduced rear yard setback in this case being consistent with what else is happening on that side of Main Street. And the negative implications, there are implications for the privacy of neighbors, the overlook, the loss of sun potentially, etc. So for rear yard neighbors, that's a big impact. But the biggest impact that we're concerned about is the lack of soft landscaping and soil mass that would allow for a real tree canopy, for trees not only to exist, but to thrive. And the city has set an aspirational and very admirable goal of more trees in the city. The city has recognized the importance of trees to citizens' health and well-being, to mitigating climate change. So trees, I think we all agree, trees are fundamentally important. And the city has acknowledged that even in urban neighborhoods, the tree canopy is extremely important on both private and public property. So ensuring that prescribed rear yards are enforced, it's a fundamental means by which we can ensure that we have adequate tree canopy. And the idea that that you would make up for losing trees in the core by planting them elsewhere in the city, for us, that just is a non-starter. We feel that's not fair.
We're out of time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I do see that Councillor Menard has questions for you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Diane, for being here and for your work with the applicant. I know that there is a lot of support for the application overall in the community, and that obviously Sula Walk has been a staple there. And
Absolutely.
I do appreciate the concern that you've raised around trees, because we're losing our tree canopy in Capital Ward and many wards across the city. It is important to maintain that. And obviously, if every development was built this way with the rear yard setback that way, we would lose all those rear yard trees. And I think that's the main concern. So in terms of the discussions with the applicant about maintaining a tree back there, because I understand there's a tree to be removed, I'm wondering if those have been fruitful around other mitigatory measures that could allow for perhaps raised soil beds for a tree and actual growth back there. So just on that one point, if you've had those conversations.
We haven't necessarily, but I think that raised beds for trees is not, if you want mature, thriving trees with a large canopy, I'm not sure that's actually going to do it. And I think one of the issues here is potential for trees, because there are lots of places in our neighborhoods where there's just no opportunity for trees because it's been built over and there will never be an opportunity for a tree there. But when you're reducing rear yard setbacks, you're losing the opportunity and the potential for trees. So regardless of what's there or not there now, once you build over it, there won't be opportunities for trees of any size, not to thrive.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
You.
Do any other members have questions for the public delegation?
No.
No. Dan, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Masha is still with us. Do anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions for staff on this one? Oh, sorry, Councilor Menard.
Thanks, Chair. And I know this is kind of a smaller application and appreciate the indulgence of Planning Committee here. I think there's a lot of good in this application. I'm hoping that, it's approved with the recognition that obviously those rear yard setbacks for our tree canopies in all of our wards is important going forward, and that, that precedent is important. So I want to just say some good things about the application around the bicycle parking. They've added some, they've removed it from the rear yard and put it into internal storage. It's the same with the garbage and waste. The relief for the parking provision was eliminated, and I appreciate that. There's no requirement to provide parking for the development, and I think in this area it's a very walkable community, and this type of development is needed here and welcomed here. And so, I'm in support of it. I do agree with the community association around the rear yard and that tree canopy, and that we need to maintain that as much as possible. I think in these cases where perhaps there's a difference of a foot or two to create that tree canopy growth in the back, that's where I hope that in the future we can come to some more conclusions that allow for still tree growth while allowing for this type of development to proceed. So just wanted to say that. Thank the applicant for working with our office and the community association as well for working closely on this. I know it's going to be a nice development in this area when it does come to fruition. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Menard. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? In that case, I'll ask the committee, is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much, everyone. The next item on our agenda is 2504 White Street. I will be asking for the staff presentation, and there is a public delegation to address the item as well. Who's got this one?
Staff are here with us to make the presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm in your hands whenever you want to proceed.
Okay, test. Yep, great. Okay, good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Kelly Livingstone, a planner with the East Development Review Team, and I'm here to present to you the details of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 2504 White Street, which proposes to rezone the lands to permit for the development of townhouses. Next slide, please. The subject site is shown on the slide in red. It is located in Orleans South within the East Urban community. The subject lands are shown on the slide and are located just south of Renault Road between Fern Casey Street and White Street. Next slide, please. We'll get a bit of a closer view here. Shown on the slide is an air photo, and the subject site has about 11 meters of frontage to Renault Road, 30 meters of frontage to White Street to the east, and about 74 meters of frontage to a small triangular parcel of land which abuts the future extension of Fern Casey Road. The site is about 0.8 hectares in size. Next slide. Shown on the slide are some photos of the site. On the left are some street view photos of the Renault and White Street frontage. And on the bottom right is an identification of the site in kind of a 3D view. You can see the site is heavily treed, and there is an existing single detached house with frontage to White Street, as shown on the bottom left photo. It's a little tricky to see, but it's brown there. Next slide there. In the official plan, the subject lands are designated neighborhood area and are within the suburban east transect. Next slide, please. The subject lands are also within the East Urban Community Phase 2 Community Design Plan. They are designated as existing residential. And as the legend states, they also have the potential for long-term redevelopment to low and medium density residential. Next slide. The concept plan for the site is shown on the slide. The proposed development aims to redevelop the western portion of the property only, while maintaining the existing condition with the existing detached dwelling along White Street. For the area to be developed in the west, the applicant proposes a planned unit development with 4 townhouse blocks. 2 of these townhouse blocks are proposed as standard townhouses at 6 meters, so about 2 stories tall. And further west are 2.5-story stacked townhouse blocks proposed at around 8 meters tall. The planned unit development will have vehicular access from Renault Road and will provide all required parking under the zoning bylaw, including visitor parking, which is generated by the stacked townhouse use. There's also an amenity space proposed at the back with landscaping as well. Next slide, please. In order to implement the proposed plan, of course, the lands need to be rezoned. As shown on the slide, the current zoning is DR, Development Reserve, which is a blanket zone that recognizes lands that are subject to future urban development. The application proposes to rezone the property in two parts, as shown on the graphic in the top right of the slide, as Area A and Area B. The first area, Area A, is for the existing single detached home, and it will rezone the property to R1E, which permits only detached dwellings. Area B is proposed to be rezoned to R3Z for the proposed development, which generally permits a mix of residential forms, low rise from detached to townhouse dwellings. Next slide. There are also exception provisions proposed with the zoning amendment. Exceptions 1, 2, and 3 are for the R1E zone, and they are to formalize the existing site and existing accessory dwellings in the R1E zone. You'll see there to slightly increase the permitted size and height of the existing accessory structure and slightly reduce by 1 meter the rear yard setback. Exceptions 4 and 5 are to permit stacked dwellings in the R3Z zone while limiting maximum height to 11 meters. This is the same as the permitted height of townhouses in this zone. While there are some differences in building design between stacked dwellings and townhouse dwellings, by limiting height, the potential impact of this additional use is minimized. Lastly, exception 6 is to reduce the minimum lot width. That accounts for the narrow frontage to Renault Road, which is about 11.2 meters, as I've said. And then exception 7 is to slightly reduce setbacks only along the east and west interior side yards. And it's a minor reduction on the east side by 1 meter, which impacts the existing dwelling to the east. And then the reduction from 6 to 3 is only along the west interior side lot line, which abuts the vacant parcel and the future extension of Fern Casey. Now, all other permit provisions and requirements, however, of the zoning bylaw will still apply. Next slide, please. Finally, there's a proposed holding provision on the site. What this means is that before any development is permitted, the requirements of the hold must be met, and they're shown in the slide in English and French. The first is that a consent application be approved, severing the two properties along the zoning line. This is required to ensure the single detached home remains along White Street, maintaining that character, and to ensure the other parcel may be developed independently. The second two are to ensure full municipal services to the site. The applicant has demonstrated that the site can be serviced fully with sanitary and stormwater infrastructure. It's already serviced by water, but work must be done to extend. Hello? Okay. But work must be done to extend sanitary sewers to the frontage along Renault Road and also demonstrate stormwater capacity for the lands. Next slide. In conclusion, staff's recommendation is shown on the slide. Staff find the proposal to represent compatible intensification in keeping with Transect and neighborhood official plan policies that seek to intensify the built-up area and provide more housing in compatible residential forms. The proposal demonstrates a density that's consistent with requirements of the official plan's growth management framework and the East Urban Phase 2 community design plan. Therefore, we recommend approval of the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. We'll come back to city staff after we've heard from delegations. On behalf of the applicant, Patricia Warren, Nico Church, and Eric Lompré, I don't know who will make the presentation, but you've got 5 minutes to address the committee.
I'll go ahead and make the presentation. We did submit some slides, so I'll just wait till those get pulled up.
Thanks, Patricia. Good morning.
Morning. Okay, great. So good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Patricia Warren, and I'm a planner with Photon Planning and Design, representing the owner of 2504 White Street for the zoning bylaw amendment application in front of you today. Next slide, please. So this slide, Kelly did just go over the proposed development. So you won't spend too much time on this slide. The one thing that I would flag, though, is that the the parking. So vehicular parking will be provided for all of the units. The parking for the townhouse dwellings, the standard townhouse dwellings, will be accommodated in private driveways, while the parking for the stacked dwellings will be provided in the surface parking lot. And that surface parking lot is located internal to the site. Next slide, please. This graphic is just intended to provide some precedents for the type of dwelling units that are envisioned for the property. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as outlined in the staff presentation, the existing zoning, oh, can you just go back one slide? Could we just flip back to the zoning bylaw slide? Thank you. So as outlined in the staff presentation, the existing zoning on the site is development reserve, which recognizes lands intended for future urban development. As a result of the existing zoning, any future development on the subject site would be required to proceed with the zoning bylaw amendment. As outlined in the community design plan for this area, the site is envisioned for future development, and as such, the rezoning of the land is considered to be appropriate and consistent with the direction of the CDP. Next slide, please. So as part of the proposed development, the site will need to be rezoned to two separate zones, one for the existing single detached dwelling and one for the proposed development itself. 3 amendments to the R1E zone are requested for the existing single detached dwelling. A reduction of the rear yard setback is requested to accommodate a future lot line that will separate the existing dwelling and the proposed development. A future consent application to sever the lands will require the sites to be zoning compliant, and as such, the proposed amendment will ensure this zoning compliance. An increase to the maximum height and size of an accessory building is also requested. The accessory building on the site is an existing structure, and this amendment is requested to bring the structure into compliance with the zoning bylaw. No changes are proposed to the existing accessory structure. 4 amendments to the R3Z zone are requested for the proposed residential development. As stacked dwellings are not a permitted use within the R3Z zone, it is requested that stacked dwellings be permitted on the site. The original proposed zoning for the site in our original submission was R4Z, which would have permitted the stacked dwellings as well as low-rise apartments. But through discussions with city staff and after reviewing the comments from the community, the proposal was revised to an R3Z zone, so low-rise apartments would not be permitted on the site. A maximum building height of 11 meters is proposed for the stacked dwellings, which is consistent with the maximum building height of the standard townhouses. The height for the stacked dwellings will ensure that the maximum building height is the same as the townhouses and the same across the site for both dwelling types. It's also requested that the minimum required lot width be reduced to recognize the existing lot configuration. So as part of the proposed development and through a future consent application, the front lot line for the site will be along Renault Road. And as Kelly had mentioned, the lot width is approximately 11 meters, 11.2 meters, and will extend for a depth of approximately 46 meters before reaching the portion of the site to be developed. And where there is a distance of approximately 107 meters between the eastern and western property lines. Finally, a reduction of the east and west interior side yards are requested. The east side yard will abut the future lot line that separates the proposed development from the existing dwelling. The proposed interior side yard of 5 meters combined with the proposed rear yard of 11 meters will provide for an appropriate setback between the existing dwelling and the proposed townhouse block. The interior side yard setback to the west is reduced to 3 meters as the property abuts lands that are not expected to be developed. The proposed building's location closer to the west property line is intended to frame the Fern Casey Street extension and is treated more as a front yard condition as compared to a side yard condition.
30 seconds.
It should be noted that the site layout has been designed to ensure the setbacks to the interior side yards north of the development and the rear yard setback are compliant with zoning requirements, providing adequate separation between the abutting properties and providing an opportunity for future landscaping and buffering. So I'm going to end it there, but happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do members of the committee have any questions for the delegation? I don't see any. In that case, nous avons une délégation publique. Monsieur ou Madame Jean Sigouin, vous avez 5 minutes pour faire une présentation au comité. Bienvenue. Je crois que vous avez une présentation aujourd'hui. I think you have a presentation today.
Pardon me?
I think you have a presentation today.
Yes, I do.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
And
Good morning, council members and chair. My name is Jean Sigouin. My wife and I are the owners of the property at 2508 White Street, which is just adjacent to the south of 2504 White Street. If you could show the slide, please. Let me start by saying that we understand the importance of intensification, and we are in favor of development. We're also focused on the importance of development that is appealing to an existing neighborhood and to the preservation of mature trees in line with the City of Ottawa's urban tree canopy policy. Having said that, we have concerns about the relief that is being sought for the built form on and the setback reliefs being proposed for Area B of 2504 White Street. Our goal here today is to present some of those concerns and make recommendations to mitigate the negative consequences this rezoning proposal could have in Area B of the site where the PUD is planned. In the first round of the rezoning proposal, the applicant was seeking a zoning amendment to R4Z with a proposed site layout with a total of 24 units of stacked townhouses and regular townhouses. In the second round, the application changed the zoning amendment proposal to R3Z, but is now seeking a relief to allow stacked townhouses and is keeping the exact same proposed site layout of 24 units. This proposal leads to the same level of intensification, which is incompatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Appealing urban design calls for a gradual transition from one built form to another. In this particular case, all the properties surrounding the proposed PUD are single detached homes. Building townhouses close to single detached homes is a logical step in built form transition. However, going from single detached homes to stacked townhouses is a drastic change in the built form. We find that the proposed PUD development is excessive in mass, height, and bulk, and is therefore incompatible with the established physical character of the neighborhood, including from a backyard point of view. Abutting property owners bought their property with within a single detached home area, not just for its frontage appeal, but for its backyard appeal as well. We believe the impact of the stacked townhouse issues are serious for abutting property owners and ask that planning committee members reject the requested relief for stacked townhouses on this parcel of land when voting on this proposal. If the PUD site layout was made up of townhouses exclusively, there would perhaps be a total of 16 units built instead of 24. One benefit of that would be the reduced parking spots required. This opens the door to having the possibility of keeping some mature trees on the property. Also lower the carbon footprint. There'd be a possibility to move the garbage collection area to a more appropriate location. It's now adjacent to the south property. And having the possibility of a few more visitor parking spots to reduce overflow parking on adjacent streets. As for our concerns for the side yard setback reliefs being sought, we believe approving these reliefs would have a negative impact on the PUD residents themselves. With the townhouses along the west property line, residents there would have a mere 3 meters of space in their backyard. Eliminating all side yard setback reliefs being sought would improve the quality of the surroundings for the residents and once again open the door for the retention of more trees, which leads to a reduced carbon footprint. Finally, we're also concerned about the lack of any mention about having fencing and year-round natural buffer between the PUD and the existing abutting property, residential properties. In conclusion, we propose that planning committee members reject the stacked townhouse relief, reject the side yard setback reliefs, and approve the rezoning to R3Z without variances for Area B. This zoning amendment proposal would still provide the applicant the opportunity to develop his property, contribute to intensification, while also being kind to the environment, saving trees, and building a PUD that is appealing to both the unit owners and to the abutting property owners. Let's make it a wonderful design that sets the tone for what could be a very nice intensification all along the entire area along White Street in the future. Thank you for the opportunity of expressing our concerns and recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seguin, a very clear presentation. Do members of the committee have any questions for the public delegation? See none. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I know Kelly is obviously still here with us. If anyone has any questions for staff. Councillor Johnson.
I was just hoping that you could actually point out where the garbage enclosure is on the current proposed design, because I'm not able to see it too well.
For sure. Thank you, Chair. Could the presentation be brought back up? Is that okay? And throw it onto the proposed development slide, please. Okay, thank you. So the waste, the applicant has shown the waste kind of pickup area at the south end of the site. It's a little tricky to see, but there are two kind of small circles next to the stacked dwellings to the south of the parking area. So that waste area, it would be required to be screened under the zoning bylaw. I believe it's a 2-meter high screen approximately from abutting uses, but it's at the south end, if that answered your question.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct,
you.
yeah.
Yep, no, I found it. I see my colleagues have other questions, so I'll defer and listen. Thank you.
Councillor Kitts. Oh, sorry, no longer in the list. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. I remember someone saying earlier that the 2 blocks of stacked townhouses abutting what is going to become Fern Casey is built a little shorter to kind of match the other townhouses. Are you able to give that in meters? Like, what is the height of the 2 blocks of regular townhouses versus the height of the 2 blocks of stacked?
Thanks, Chair. Under the zoning bylaw amendment, one of the exception provisions that are included is to ensure the maximum height of these stacked townhouses are 11 meters. And so that limits the maximum height to the same standard as townhouses. So the stacked and the townhouses will have the same maximum height. As proposed on the plan by the applicant, the townhouses are 2 stories, 6 meters tall, assuming a 3-meter kind of height per floor. And then stacked townhouses are 2.5 meters, or 2.5 stories, so 8 meters in height.
Okay, and the second question is the holding symbol is contingent on municipal servicing. And I noticed that on Service Ottawa, there's a water main before the sewer. I have a property in my ward that has a similar holding symbol that has some challenges getting to the sewer connection. Do you or the applicants foresee any sort of challenges accessing that sewer underneath or above that water main?
Thank you, Chair. It's challenging for me to comment on servicing matters as a planner. Perhaps the applicant would have a response if Patricia's still on the call. I would say it has been reviewed, and extension of that sanitary sewer would have to occur along Renault Road, I believe, to the property frontage, and they would connect through the at that frontage down to the PUD as proposed. But I'll allow Patricia to perhaps elaborate if.
Yeah, I think the owner is aware that the holding symbol is being applied. And so I think they are aware that this that they would have to look into this a little bit further. And at site plan, these types of things will come up and they will be reviewed. I think Nico's on the call too, and I'm not sure if he has anything to add to that.
Sorry, we wouldn't ordinarily have the applicant responding to questions at this point. So
Okay.
I'd invite Councillor Lowe maybe to follow up with the applicant sometime before council.
Nope, I got the answer I needed. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry.
Thank you for this. The argument that the compatibility, someone's trying to call me. The compatibility, everything's ringing here. Argument is one that I'm generally sympathetic to. In Canada, we have a lot of this. We have single family homes, then we have stacked towns. We have a lot of that. There's usually a bigger distance though. So to the delegation's point, that the separations, or whether it's fencing or anything, is that something that still has to be worked out in site plan? What that would look like to divide everybody up?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yeah, certainly. The site plan, as the proposal is presented, a site plan would be required. And certainly staff would work with the applicant to appropriately site the setbacks, ensure the property is most compatible with the surrounding environment. Fencing, of course, is approved through site plan and evaluated in that way. How can landscaping be used to buffer as well? Those are all considerations that we would certainly look at through site plan in order to ensure it's as compatible as possible. There's only so much I think a zoning bylaw amendment can do. There's the site plan is kind of an important consideration for sure. That's my response. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. There is still more to come. Just, I know that we as councillors don't have a lot of authority over site plan, but I think, community can work pretty well with the developers. We've always found that in Canada, the developers are always willing to work closely with, especially the neighboring community association or whoever, or community condo court. This is maybe one neighbor, but can be done. The other thing is, I would ask, were there other designs submitted first? I'm thinking about this application in Canada where that holding provision for the water never worked out. It never, and they had many designs. They went back and forth and back and forth. Eventually they've scrapped the entire thing. And I'm not sure what the status is right now. So it's a real thing that if that doesn't work, it may not go forward at all. But are there other design options right now?
Thank you, Chair. No other design options were presented. As the applicant mentioned, they did come in with a proposal for an R4Z zone, which presented issues because that would permit for a low-rise apartment building. But as it stands, this is kind of primarily the design we've looked at and evaluated.
Okay, but the community has not seen any other option or any other thinking?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. It's something to think about, though. You never know if this will actually go forward. I will just make the other comment that, we in Canada have had applications go forward where the conditions are wholly inappropriate. And, when I look at the other designs of Canada, it isn't inappropriate to have townhomes near other homes. It's always just about that separation. So I'm sympathetic that people are not prepared to have something like that built right beside their house. But it is a way of making sure there's enough different types of housing in one area. So I'm generally supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Curry was saying, I know some of the concerns expressed by the delegation and by surrounding residents will be or can be addressed at site plan. Like, for example, the location of the garbage and the parking. But will a tree conservation report be requested for this application?
Yes, as a tree conservation report would definitely be required with this site plan application. Yep.
Great, thank you for that. Because the previous item we were talking about the loss of one tree. There's significant tree loss for this application. So I think that's important. And I'll just make some comments. I don't see any other hands. In the not so distant past, much of my ward was rural, which you wouldn't know now as Renault sees 20,000 cars daily. But it was, and as such, White Street feels more like a rural village in its character. but it's surrounded by development reserve land. So what's being proposed is a big change for the residents, and I sympathize with them. And I do want to acknowledge that there were changes made to the application, as you heard, in response to community concerns, which is important and which is what I always push for. As you heard, including requesting an R3 zone instead of an R4 zone, but this is still a big change. And something I'd also like to point out is that this application is under the threshold to trigger a traffic impact assessment. And the last application we considered in this area off for no was the same. And the next application we're going to consider in this area is the same. And just like that, we've added 100 parking spaces in a matter of weeks. And it's that cumulative impact that has contributed to the congestion that you hear me talk about at every planning committee meeting. So I feel a bit handcuffed when it comes to these applications that, aren't really supporting 15-minute neighborhoods, because it's zone development reserve, it's, infill. And if we reject it, it most certainly won't hold up at the OLT and is likely to get the same result as the STC application in Canada North, where we couldn't even find a planner to defend it. So it feels a bit out of our control, but what is within our control is acknowledging the lack of mobility options in this area, insisting on commercial where possible, like Councillor Gower's motion today. I thought that was excellent, wholly supportive of that approach. And this evening, I'm going to the OC Transpo route review session, and where I'm urging staff to consider opportunity, not only current ridership, when we're looking at those route reviews. So in the interim, I do try my best to work with applicants to respond to community feedback, but we're going to keep seeing these applications come forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kitts. Well said. Are there any other questions or comments? In that case, I'll ask the committee if this item is carried. Carried. Thank you very much. The last big item we have on the agenda today is 1568 Meadowbrook Road in Beacon Hill, Searville. I will ask Lucy to make a presentation on this one, and then the applicant's representative, Mr. Hume, is here. Good morning, Ms. Ramirez. We're in your hands.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members of committee, staff, and members of the public. My name is Lucy Ramirez, and I'm the planner and the file lead for the zoning bylaw amendment at 1568 Meadowbrook Road. Next slide, please. So the subject site is in the Pineview neighborhood and has frontage on Meadowbrook Road. The property abuts a detached dwelling to the west and a townhouse condominium, CC 70, to the east. The rear lot line abuts municipal-owned park, Maxim Park. Next slide, please. So the site is presently occupied by a detached dwelling and a detached garage. I've placed a flag kind of icon to show you where the property is. The streetscape along Meadowbrook Road is characterized by a mix of dwelling types, which is reflective of the zoning, and there is open space along Meadowbrook Road further to the south, Searville Park and Meadowbrook Park. So Blair Station is northeast of the site. It's a walking distance of approximately 1 kilometer, a 14-minute walk. Those two towers that you see in photo 4 with the arrow just above them are a good visual marker for the location of the transit station. So the subject property is just outside the Blair transit-oriented development area, specifically the south sector, which includes properties within an 800-meter walk from the station platform. Next slide, please. So here I've marked where the site is with a little star and have an arrow pointing towards it. The site is designated outer urban neighborhood per Schedule A and B3 of the official plan. This designation permits a mix of building forms and densities. Next slide, please. So this slide is a comparison between the R1 WW zone and the R2, the proposed zone, the R2N with an urban exception. As of right, within the R1 WW zone, the property could be severed into 3 lots and 3 detached dwellings could be constructed. Post Bill 23, an additional 2 units could be built per lot for a total of 9 units constructed on the property. What you see below the R2N urban exception zone is what is being proposed. The applicant is proposing to sever it into 4 lots and having the units behind each other and then the parking internal to the site. The proposed dwellings maintain the character of the neighborhood in zoning terms, such as building setbacks, as the setbacks in the R1WW zone and the R2N urban exception zone will remain the same. The height is increasing from 8.5 to 9 meters. However, the zoning will restrict the building form to 2 stories. Next slide, please. So this is the site concept plan and then the elevations. The proposal consists of 4 long semi-detached buildings. So a long semi-detached dwelling is a narrower version of a traditional semi-detached dwelling, and it resembles a detached dwelling from the street. It's a residential use building that contains 2 principal dwellings. They're arranged one behind the other. Long semi-detached dwellings fit on narrower lot widths than those that are required for traditional side-by-side buildings. And typically, a long semi-detached dwelling needs only 1 driveway that accesses a shared parking area. And in this case, there are 4 long semi-detached dwellings adjacent to each other, and the shared driveways serve 4 principal dwellings. Next slide, please. So the proposal supports a compact urban built form. It's denser development and it's denser development. That being said, critical elements such as soft landscaping in the front yard, amenity space in the front and rear yards, a shared driveway, vehicular parking internal to the site, bicycle parking, dedicated pedestrian walkways, and waste management areas are being proposed. Next slide, please. So I've evaluated this against the council approved official plan, and the proposal complies with the following policies. Within the urban area, the plan is to support growth, and we have a target of 47% within the area that was built up as of July 1st, 2018. This proposal supports intensification, a diversity of housing. By maintaining the setbacks, you're maintaining that suburban pattern and built form. And this proposal is also guiding towards evolution of 15-minute neighborhood. Next slide, please. So the site is well connected to a mix of land uses where daily and weekly needs can be accessed within a 15-minute walk. So this includes shops, services, food, schools, employment, green spaces, parks, and pathways. In the image, I've identified the property, schools, commercial plazas, and parks and green spaces are in the green little bubbles. Generally, the official plan equates 15-minute neighborhood to a 900-meter radius or 1,200 meters on the pedestrian network. Next slide, please. This is a visual breakdown of the units. There are 8 principal dwellings proposed, and there are 8 secondary dwelling units proposed below grade. Next slide, please. For the parking supply, the proposal complies with the zoning bylaw, and there are 8 parking spaces provided, 1 for each principal dwelling. There are no parking spaces provided for the secondary dwelling units. None are required by the bylaw. And there are also 0 visitor parking spaces. None are required by the bylaw. The applicant is providing 8 bicycle parking spaces, and those are written into the urban exception, and those will serve the secondary dwelling units. Next slide, please. When you're increasing density, I find waste management is an area that has to be addressed, and this proposal is providing 2 areas for waste management. In the front unit, it's going to be inside the building, and then in the rear unit, it's going to be attached to the building. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the recommendation before you today is to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for 1568 Meadowbrook Road from residential first density WW to residential second density subzone N, and with an urban exception. And this will permit 4 long semi-detached buildings consisting of 16 dwelling units, 8 principal and 8 secondary dwelling units. Next slide, please. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We'll come back to you after the applicant and the public delegation have had an opportunity to speak. Mr. Hume is here on behalf of the applicant. Good morning, Peter. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Does it still flash red? There you go. different perspective than I'm used to. And we're really excited to be here. It's been a long road for us. We started this back in May 2021, if you can believe that. Our application was deemed complete in February 2022, and it's May 2023, and we're happy to be here at Planning Committee. I won't repeat the presentation or any of the details of the presentation that was just made. It was very comprehensive. It was actually very good. I will apologize for the small typo in our, well, it's quite a large typo in our presentation. It is 1568, not 1598. But what I think, if you could go to slide number 4, what I think is important to understand is a little bit of the community context. What we're really doing here is introducing a little bit of a different typology to that particular area. You can see to the left, we have townhouses. To the right, we have a large ranch-style bungalow. You can ignore the front yard parking because I don't think that that's allowed. But and across the street is where you start to see the R2 end zone, and you start to see different typologies. So what we're really just doing is bringing what's happening across the street to the other side of the street, which is it is a major collector on your road network. So it's really where you should see some of those new topologies coming into play. And so when we looked at this, we looked at the 3-unit option, or the as of right option. But when we started to see what was happening around the neighborhood and developments that were occurring, it was presented to us as a perfect opportunity to bring a different topology to a major collector very close to transit and in keeping with your official plan. Now, if I was to say, your official plan probably would like a low-rise apartment building on this site. It's a major collector, 750 meters to a major transit node. But what we were, when we looked at it, we looked at a low-rise apartment building and said, it's really not appropriate for the site. We can't get the appropriate transitions. So what we ultimately brought forward was a very similar, presents as a single family home, 2 stories, limited access. We provided the appropriate parking for the site. So we think it fits well into the broader community context. So if I can go to the next slide. And sort of that's a visual picture that gives you the sites down at the left-hand corner. You walk up the street and then up a nice linear parquet to, well, it's not a parquet, but a linear walking trail to the entrance to the transit bridge. 750 meters, it's an easy walk. You can walk down the side street, brings you to protected pathways. And I just noted for you, when we talk about introducing new topologies on a side street there on Maxime, you're exactly what's being proposed on your major collector is happening on your side streets. So that's an 8-unit development, 2 long semi buildings that's happening. So from a community context, you're really seeing an introduction of this new typology there. So it's not something that is new or in fact undesirable in the community. And Mr. Chair, I'll leave it there. And if you have questions, we're happy to answer them. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any questions for the delegation? Mr. Tierney. Councillor Tierney.
I'm not that old, Jeff.
Mr.
Keep going. Former Councillor Hume, I want to know how many times you've actually gone back and forth on this specific file. I know we've had some pretty heated discussions with the Pineview Community Association, and modifications were made at many points. But this file has really been a long file going back and forth. And there was a couple of concerns of parking, which is always one that comes up. But what about snow load? If you could speak to snow load and also things related to safety on the street, because there is plans in the very near future to add in some cycling infrastructure along Meadowbrook, if you're aware. Were you aware of that?
Cycling infrastructure on Meadowbrook?
Correct.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Okay. And in regards to snow load, what does that look like?
Well, most of the parking is covered parking. So you pull into the laneway and you'd turn to into covered parking spaces. There is some small areas which you're going to be able to leave snow, but it's going to be no different than it is if you had a single family home with well, it's not a single family home anymore, right? It would be a 3-unit building there with a driveway. What's interesting here is that we're sharing driveways. So as you saw in the staff presentation, you could have, as of right, 3 driveways onto the street. And what you're getting here is 2 driveways, much smaller. In fact, the staff were very good at creating driveways and walkways to the back units. So that's I think it's a better presentation at the street than the option, which is the 3 unit complying or the 3 singles lots complying. So.
Okay, well, I'll wait to hear from the delegation that is speaking today, but I think we all understand the sensitivity of this one because of the fact, unlike somewhere like Telesat Court, where it's literally beside transit, there's very beautiful bungalows next to it. And I know character of community holds no value in reality, but this is a bit more of a challenge. So I do appreciate the time that you've spent going back and forth and working with the community association, adding in the trees. I think that is very important. But this is a little more sensitive than a typical file. And, I'm pretty pro development when it comes to intensification. But this one is not the same, the regular same kind of file that's going in. But I do recognize that this is where the city is going in the future. So thank you very much for coming out and making a delegation today, Peter.
Yeah, just to add, the form you see on today is not the form that was submitted with the application. So in the back and forth with staff, several changes were made. The front units got smaller. The walkways were added, so the separation between the units got bigger. And those were directives that or things that happened the back and forth between staff. So what you're seeing today is an evolution to what was originally provided.
And I completely concur. I was hoping to tease that out. And also with the good work of our Pineview Community Association, that was a pretty heated discussion we had. But at the same time, I think that you recognize the sensitivity of this. So I'll wait for the next delegation. But again, thanks for coming out today, Peter.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. Mr. Paul Major is a public delegation, and I understand he's calling in. Paul, are you there?
Yes, I just got in there. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Fantastic. We can hear you. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Major, and I reside at 1408 Ridgebrook Drive. Actually, I'm the house in question, the lot in question. From my actually kitchen window, I can see the house. I've been here 40 years. And it's, what was it, good neighbors. I've had good neighbors. It's a very good neighborhood here. And actually, we just beside there, it's only a single house right now. And they did build a garage a few years back. And it's been, Mr. Savage was my neighbor. Michelle was the last neighbor there. Very good people and very quiet neighborhood. Now, I know what they're proposing. They're proposing 8 principal units with each a secondary unit, which is 16 multi-unit dwelling. So that means, I guess, more parking. I don't know, more cars. Right now, there's always been 1 or 2 cars at the most. Now it's going to be, I don't know if there's 16 units. I don't know if it's going to be at least 1 car per unit, maybe more, because most people have 1 or 2 or 3 cars nowadays. So again, as I'm right beside the unit. You know, I'm on actually I'm a townhouse on Ridgebrook Drive, but my unit is east of the single house in question here on it. So to me personally, I would be so many new people over there. So the noise, I know right now there's 1 unit, and it's going to be, I don't know if that's 16 units in all, but anyways, it's certainly, it's probably going to be about, I don't know, 30, 40 more people there. So that's going to create more noise. I know it might create, the street ahead is Odell. And I think they're going to come out. I don't know if the parking's come on, but it's going to right now in Meadowbrook. It's people parking on Meadowbrook, and it's it's almost like I don't park on Meadowbrook. I have my own parking here, but Meadowbrook, lots of people are parking on Meadowbrook, and it's very difficult to get people, not me, but people sometimes can't get any parking. So imagine with, I don't know, 16 or whatever, how many more cars, that's going to create certainly more parking problems on it. And I guess our neighborhood is always been, again, I've been 40 years here, and I've really, it's a great neighborhood. It's very quiet, but I find it good. Now, I think with this, new project, it's certainly it's going to create certainly more noise, and it could be more pollution also. And again, I will not be, for example, I'm in my kitchen right now. I'm looking at it right now, and they'll build. I am about 20 feet away. 20 feet from the fence. So there's going to be a new unit. It's going to block my view. But again, this is secondary. But I find that with so many people in I wouldn't mind if they put, I don't know, the 2 houses or 3 houses, but now it's going to be 16 units and so many people. And it's going to create a little bit more traffic and a little bit more noise. I don't know. It's, again, I'm all for development, but we've had so much quiet. I've been so blessed here with so many good neighbors and so and quiet. So now it's going to be more people and I guess more traffic, more noise. I don't know, more pollution maybe on it. So again, I'd rather. If I like the old bylaw, the zoning, which prepared, I guess, on that lot would probably be 2 or 3 houses. That I don't mind that, but more than that would be certainly a little too. Quite a bit noise and everything else and on it. And again, it's. Like I have no problem with investors, I think, but I think that lots of people like to make a bit more money. Anyway, this is my view. I've been here 40 years, and I've talked to quite a few of my neighbors. I know originally I went around, and there was 24 of them originally that phoned in, or I know right now probably they're not there, but were against it. So this is basically my view, and I thank you for listening to me, and again, whatever happens, happens, but let's hope for the best here. So again, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Major. Does anyone have any questions, Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you very much, Paul, for coming out today. And I actually sat in your kitchen last year with your lovely wife, and
I even gave you a coffee. Would you believe?
You did. It wasn't Sanka, but we really did have a good discussion. And I know you're not even you while you are a neighbor on one side, even your other neighbor that has the bungalow. I also went to their house and had a discussion with them as well.
Right.
This one's challenging because I do have two concerns that still remain related to the snow load situation and the fact that the applicant is unaware of the new cycling infrastructure that will be going along the road and how this can create conflicts along with traffic. And I know a lot of people say parking is an issue. I also did make sure that yourself and the neighbor, Andre, are aware of your options. This isn't the end of the road. There's always an option to be able to go ahead and challenge this, even if it does pass today. And I do see in my calendar that we have a phone call tomorrow morning. So I'll be certain to have that discussion with you again with your neighbor as well. So I'm very happy to hear that you showed up today, but I will be speaking with you again tomorrow. I will be dissenting on this item, folks, not because I don't believe in intensification. It's just there's still some minor issues that are not resolved, and hopefully we can get those resolved prior to council. But at this point, that's my position, Paul. I made that commitment to the community. I know that even the Pineview Community Association has done great work on getting some of the changes done and put in place. At the same time, there's still those outstanding issues on parking, snow loads. And again, the applicant not knowing about the cycling infrastructure creates a bit of a challenge for me. I don't know why we're not linking all these things up. So I just wanted you to know, Paul, where my head's at, and I'll look forward to speaking to you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney. Are there any other questions from Mr. Major? See none. Lucy is still with us. Does anyone have any questions for the planners? Councillor Gower or Vice Chair Gower?
It's not a question, it's a comment. I just wanted to say I appreciated seeing the transit context section of the report, and I thought it was really helpful to put the application in the right context. And it's a neighborhood that seems to be very well connected to transit. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Are there any other questions or comments? I'll just add one of my own, which is when I take a look at the size of these lots, the need to go beyond the R1 zoning is in my mind absolutely critical. We are all getting hammered right now with pothole complaints, and pothole complaints get worse as roads are not maintained. And in order to maintain roads and keep taxes relatively low, we have to have density. It's simple math. And the introduction of density into this neighborhood is going to do its part for making this a more economically sustainable city. In addition to having people living closer to the downtown core rather than having to move further out into the suburbs, which means a more environmentally sustainable city as well. So I'm glad to see that the kinds of densities that some of our inner urban neighborhoods have been dealing with for a long time is starting to come into the rest of the city. And I know this is going to be a focus for our comprehensive zoning bylaw discussions over the course of the next year. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll ask whether this is carried with Councillor Tierney's dissent.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right. That, I believe, ends the big substantive agenda. The remaining items on the list, the status update for Planning and Housing Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending May 5th, 2023. Is that received? Thank you. There are no in-camera items. I know Councillor Lowe has made a request to lift the cash in lieu of parkland item from the information previously distributed. Is the committee amenable to that lifting?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lowe, please proceed.
Thank you. Just a brief question to Parks Planning staff, Kevin Reary or someone related. So Councillor Hill and I, well, as you know, Ward 24 is a new ward. So I started with a cash in lieu of 0, and I am still at a cash in lieu of 0. But Councillor Hill and I have agreed that based on the size of his ward and based on the size of his ward that my ward took over, we've agreed to a formula that basically transfers 17.8% of his present cash in lieu into my my bank, basically. This was discussed a number of months ago, and we did send off a request to do that a number of months ago. So I'm just wondering, has there been any updates? Because at present, the Q1 document, granted, it is a Q1 document, so maybe it's not updated yet, but has that gone forward, or should I be waiting a little more for that?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if there's anyone from Parks Planning or the Treasury on the call. Respectfully, Mr. Chair, I don't have a direct answer to the question, but I'm happy to work with finance staff or Parks Planning to get that, before council and make sure that a connection with Councillor Lowe is made.
Thank you. My encouragement would be to make sure Councillor Lowe has an answer maybe by the end of today, if that's possible. Anything else, Councillor Lowe?
No, that was it. I know this is normally an email item, but my emails kind of went unanswered.
Understood. So is the cash in lieu, oh, that's information previously distributed. Are there any notices of motion for subsequent meeting? See none. Are there any inquiries? See none. There's no other business. Is the committee amenable to a late addition to other business?
I just want to make a statement, Chair, and you touched upon it with the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, which is coming up. Today, we saw a number of very reasonable planning applications before us, which resulted in some community opposition. And I don't want to sound hypocritical because in my ward, I face the same type of opposition to very reasonable applications. And where I'm going with this statement is, as I said during the official plan review, when we tackle the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, I believe the city needs to be very clear in communicating to the public what's coming with respect to intensification in the city. We're in a housing and homelessness emergency. We need all types of new housing. We have 400,000 more people coming over 30 years. Every single neighborhood is going to be impacted by intensification. And there's a disconnect between what's coming and what people are aware of and what people are willing to accept. And we can't have major battles over every single type of zoning application that comes before us. Yes, the public has the right to speak. Public has a right to be opposed. But I think we can mitigate some of that opposition by being very clear and reinforcing in the public, with the public, about what's coming. 400,000 more people over the next 30 years. So again, I just want to plant that as we go through the zoning bylaw review, the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, we have to tell that story. We have to provide the public that context and why we're doing this and why it's why intensification is good. There are many benefits of intensification over sprawl, which we addressed during the OP process. So I just wanted to raise that because again, today we saw some very reasonable applications, and which I appreciate the committee approved. But it just, in my mind, reinforces when we go through the bylaw review, we have to tell that story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Brockington, because I think that is what our real issue is. And I've said this for years. As a matter of fact, I'm happy to hear the chair's comments that he'll be very supportive of all applications that come in the future. I don't think that was necessarily the case in the past. And we have to make sure people are aware with the new bylaws coming in, that is going to affect, and I've said this many times, Jeff, your area, my area, Riley's area, and we have to just make sure we inform the public of what decisions we've made. People don't really wake up to things until it gets into their own backyard. And that is the challenge that we have. And I think we have to make sure that we're also very sensitive at the same time as we approach a lot of these things, and making sure that our planning staff also take into consideration things like snow load, which it seems minor till you're buried under snow for 6 months. And now you have no place to put snow and you have problems on the street. So I think we have a lot of work to do ahead of us, Mr. Chair. I think you're going to do a terrific job at the helm. But I do appreciate Riley's comments. I think they really are what we're all feeling, especially inside. People keep forgetting I'm inside the green belt. I'm inside the green belt. I am urban. You know, I'm seeing a lot of applications. I have at least 25 more coming in, and I know I'm going to have a lot of pressures, but where it makes sense, and making sure we still answer the questions for our constituents is very critical. It's not a carte blanche. You know, we're not going to ask questions. We're going to make sure that we get the situations that are of concern to neighbors still addressed to the best possible way we can. But we have to inform everybody that this is the new reality. There is going to be intensification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Councillor Brockington, for bringing this up, because it's a thought that I have very often. Allow me, as the representative of the most densely packed ward in the city, to talk about the benefits of having more neighbors. I think density gets a bad rap sometimes, but those of us who live in communities closer to our neighbors really benefit from the connections and the community development that happens from learning to live with other people and making space for other people. And you can see from the balance in my cash and lieu of Parkland Fund, we have a lot of towers coming to my ward, and we're running out of land downtown. We really, really need other wards, especially within the Greenbelt, to accept some of this density, because we need it everywhere. And I think we really need to change the conversation about density. I must admit, it's like nails on a chalkboard. Every time I hear somebody say it's going to be too many people, maybe three houses would be okay, but not 25. We have 400,000 people that we need to house in the next few years. We have a housing and homelessness emergency. We need to learn to live with each other. And I'm very, very happy to talk about the benefits of doing that. And even in my own ward, which is already the most densely packed, I have so many neighbors who want more amenities, who want that grocery store at the bottom of the condo building. And they're not going to get that until there's 3 or 4 more towers nearby to, you know, to have a customer base for that service. So there's a lot of benefits that come with that densification that moves us towards the 15-minute neighborhoods that so many people want. So I also want to say thank you to residents of other wards. As you get used to this process and get used to living with more people near you, I can assure you it's generally a very good thing. And it's the thing I love about living in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the point Councillor Brockington is making is that in terms of being other business of this meeting is very much that staff need to start communicating some of this in a very clear way to residents. Councillor Dudas.
I won't belabor the point too much, but I do think that Councillor Brockington brought up an excellent aspect to this, that communication is key. And I will say that part of the communication has to include the new limitations on our role as councillors and the community's role in influencing things like site plan applications. You know, I know we've talked about this at length before, that with the provincial changes to the legislation, some of the files that we're working on have been grandfathered. They may have come in before this legislation, and we have more of a say on it. The community has more of a say on it than what we do have after that timeline has been met. So I'm facing that in my own community. I have one property that was done prior to that legislation coming in, totally different roles. We're now involved. I can pull delegated authority. We can bring it to committee. Don't know if I will, but once again, those options are there. And now I'm trying to communicate to my residents about what it means under this new reality. And really, you know, it's up to the developer whether they want to have a meeting. So there's different aspects that I think the community really does need to understand. It's not just about density. It's not just about educating those pieces. It's also about the limitations placed upon us by the provincial government to our ability to influence or to amend any of these maybe more so lesser dense applications that don't require zoning amendments or large scale amendments. So I think that that will be key as well too, is the communications.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dudas. Seeing no further comments on this topic, we are next going to meet on Tuesday, May 30th for a joint Planning and Housing Committee and Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee meeting. I'll check to see whether we're going to do that here or in chambers. That'll be in chambers. And on Wednesday, June 7th, 2023, we'll have our next regular Planning and Housing Committee meeting.